Oh hey, did you see the Fifth Element movie? Yeah, it was the greatest ever! Well, check this out. Wow! This must be the greatest game ever! I can't stop! Hello and welcome to Press A to Learn, a show that takes your favourite film but doesn't turn them into a stinky pile of butts. I'm Matt, and today we're going to look into the phenomenon that is the constant poop movies turn into when transformed from this to this. I mean, how hard could it be to make a game about a guy flying around in the most badass armoured suit? Well, there are a number of factors that go against making a good movie-based game, from issues on the publishing side to the actual development conditions for making the game. Sure, you can look at your favourite action hero on the big screen and think, golly, this protagonist is the coolest ever. You gotta be real bad to not be able to make a good game from his coolness. However, in this episode we're going to look into the main complications of making these games before finding out ways to overcome them. One of the main problems lies in the publishing side of the games. Firstly, there's a general notion that games will sell on the licensed property alone. Why spend months and even years creating a brand new character for kids to enjoy when they can just use Thor? This is where it gets a bit seedy, as the target demographics are kids so young that they can't really buy games. Why is this so bad? Because it ends up being on the parents with no gaming knowledge that picks these games up for their kids. The kind of parent looking around in game shops at a blur of random titles they've never even heard of and picking one out with the kid's favourite character on the front. Instead of looking at the quality of the game through reviews and research, they buy the game with the trust that no one will sell a bad product sporting a major character or brand. Another problem faced is the actual cost of acquiring the IP to be made into the game, with most of the cost being spent on the intellectual property itself, rather than making the game good. This means that developers see less money for what they make, inevitably putting more pressure to ship the game out sooner with less polish. Tying all of these points together is the main factor that publishers push to get the games released with the cinema's release of the film. It's not often until later in the film's development until publishers decide to create a tie-in game. When this is the case, there is almost no chance of getting a game with good polish before it's shipped out the door. Between finding out information about the film whilst the film itself is being created, and having such tight deadlines, most of the development is spent in the 11th hour and thus shows in the final product. That said, not every movie tie-in game is bad. One of the best movie tie-in games on the PS2 era, for me, was Spider-Man 2. I remember coming back from school after a long grind of work, sitting down and literally web-slinging around the city, stopping all of the petty crimes and popping that one girl's balloon that she could never keep hold of. Anyway, this was a movie tie-in game, and it had me playing the game daily even though I'd completed the game weeks ago. There was also the game The Punisher on the PlayStation 2, which was just straight out awesome, in my humble opinion. One of those games that I never hear many people praising, but I found it to be total badass. That's another movie game that I found quite good. But what about more modern titles? Well, there are the recent Batman games. Aside from the attempt to create a tie-in game of Batman Begins, with the game of the same title, a game which was... yeah... all of the games featuring Batman, from Batman Arkham Asylum onwards, are great. Hell, Batman Arkham Asylum even won Game of the Year, an amazing feat considering it was a comic book hero. I think it may have even been the first comic book hero game to win Game of the Year. And that's not forgetting the countless awesome LEGO games that have come out. They've done their fair share of awesome Batman games, as well as Pirates of the Caribbean, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and much more. So, where do most movie tie-in games go wrong? Well, for one, they don't follow their movie counterparts point for point. There are a few issues with making a game follow a movie's exact plot. Firstly, a film on average is about 2 hours. To translate this into an 8 or so hour game would mean really padding out the space between the film scene scenarios with something. In most cases, this something is very simple gameplay that's repeated throughout the game. An example being repetitive combat or the dreaded quick time events. Ah! So a lot of the experiences end up with the player watching what feels like a segment of the film, with a lot of copy and paste style combat in between. The idea of using 2 hours of story isn't nearly enough to be spread out for 8 hours or so the experience just feels spread thin. Mechanics wise, if we look at the Batman game, they managed to find a smooth way to integrate stealth with good combat action. In typical stealth games, a lot is taken away from the player in terms of combat, almost forcing the player to take the stealth option, as doing it any other way easily ends up with the player's death. In action games, sometimes the stealth isn't implemented very well and is tacked on, creating for some real frustrating sections in the game. In Batman, you get rewarded by the game for using your wits and staying in the shadows, utilising all of your bat gadgets to take out enemies one by one. However, when put in a fight, you can hold your own with fight mechanics that make you feel badass. This really captures the character of Batman very well, as you really feel like the Caped Crusader using all of your cool gadgets and breaking people's faces with your fists of justice. Looking back at the Spider-Man game for PlayStation 2, the developers created the first Spider-Man game to have web slinging that actually stuck to the buildings rather than the sky in the previous games, and combined it with all of Manhattan, Roosevelt, Ellis and Liberty Islands. This, mixed with cool combat with an open world sandbox, made for one hell of a game. When you played this game, you were Spider-Man. These games utilise tight mechanics designed to feel like the character they were meant to portray. Another problem with following the movie's story point for point is, more often than not, you've probably already seen the movie before playing the game. What I mean by this is, you've already seen what happens. You know the story. It's the same effect as when you read a good book before seeing a film. No matter what the film does, it can never capture every idea the book tried to portray. The way we absorb information from a book through our imagination is different to how we see it in films. In the same sense, the way we view information from a film is vastly different to how we play it from games. Looking at these games, they do not follow the film's plot precisely, often expanding on the plot and adding way more characters and enemies in the process. In Spider-Man 2, we got to see iconic characters such as Rhino, Shocker, Mysterio and Black Cat, and much more. And in the Punisher game, there's a segment where you raid Stark Towers and bump into Iron Man. Hell, the game can even pull away from the movies and become its own thing, focusing on portraying the main character and his enemies in their own unique way. One of the main things that needs to happen to help make a good movie tie-in game is giving the developers more time and budget. Rather than pouring money at the IP alone and using the acquired name to sell the game, find the budget to put into the game's development and use developers that are fans of the thing that they're making. It may be more money, but it's totally worth it. When you play the recent Ghostbusters game, you can really feel the passion that went into making everything feel like the original films. From the characters' dialogues and behaviours, to the environment that you play in, and even the gadgets you use in the gameplay. All of this feels like it's lifted straight out of the film, with you playing a whole new experience not seen in cinemas. This is how movie tie-in games should feel. If we can do this, who knows the kind of cool characters and worlds we can interact with. There are a lot of really cool films being made, and if we can find good ways to translate it into games, we'll have so many hours of enjoyment roaming around as our favourite characters we loved from cinemas, and many hours of intricate plots we can expand on in ways films couldn't deliver. Anyway, that's all we have time for on this episode. If you'd like to add your own points on this topic, please leave them in the comments below. Also, if you learned something new, leave a like, and if you like this episode, then please check out the last Press A to Learn, or check out this review on This War of Mine. Don't forget to subscribe for more Press A to Learn, as well as more game related content. I'm Matt, and thanks for watching.